Hey, what's up, guys? We have Edson here. He wrote a book called Strange Light. It's about paranormal activity, paranormal experiences, UFOs, NDEs, stuff like that. So, how's it going, Edson? How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah. So I am really just a old IT guy that got stuck down a few rabbit holes and ended up writing this book where I talk to people that have all different sorts of unexplained experiences and just try to understand, what happened from their perspective and how it may have affected their life.
Okay, cool. And then, what about you? Have you had any personal experiences?
I haven't had a lot of like significant experiences myself. I came from a place of being more of a skeptic, um, but little things over the time have sort of chipped away at my skeptical mindset. Not so much from personal experiences, but just from talking to people and some of the whistleblower things that have come out with the UFO topic and just some. There have been a few like minor events in my life that were looking back were pretty big synchronicities, but at the time I didn't really think about them that way. It was just like, oh, this is really, really good luck. So since I started on this book, I have had some interesting experiences, mostly because I've been sort of around people that have these experiences. But again, nothing that I've experienced is anywhere on the scale of the people that I interviewed for the book.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm tend to be like a skeptic, although the government has, you probably know, has come out and basically said there are UFOs, like they do exist. We don't know what they are. And I don't really know if they've really said anything about knowing what they are at all, except that they do exist. There was the whole thing last year, a little bit more than last year, like last Christmas, I guess, where there was like all the weird drones flying around. I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah, yeah.
so it's kind of like, for I don't know, at this point it's almost kind of like. And then I just saw something on. There was actually a surf. I don't know. You probably don't know anything about Surfline, but there's a Surfline cam that is meant to show the surf. But I just saw this like today or yesterday, where it showed like two UFOs at night coming, but it's constantly filming. And I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the only thing you could really say that it looked like was two UFOs, and I'm pretty sure it was legit coming from that company. So obviously, at this point, it's safe to say there's something out there. I guess the question is what. I tend to think that it's probably. I would just go ahead and assume, but I don't know. This could be ignorance. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like that. It's just kind of some sort of. It can be scientifically explained somehow via light refraction or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, what were some of the synchronicities you saw earlier on in your life? Some of the more, was it like kind of like more of like coincidences type stuff?
Yeah, it was like really it was like coincidences on steroids kind of, It was like so I'll give you my story sort of a shortened version of it, but back in 2016, I was going through a divorce. Um Things were a little rough and then suddenly my soon to be ex was out of the picture. She was arrested and there was a whole, I don't want to go into that story, but basically I was suddenly a single dad, but the house that she was living in was still in my name. The car was still in my name. And suddenly I had to figure out how to sell this house while being a single dad and working full time and all this stuff. And it was really hard to go through the house and try and set my emotions aside and figure out what to keep and what to throw away and all this. And then 6 months after that, my mom passed away, and I'm an only child, and so her house became my house. And now I have another house that I have to clear out and figure out how emotionally deal with and logistically deal with all of these things in these two houses. And um my ex's house, I was working on getting it ready to sell because I couldn't really afford to keep it because I was already living somewhere else. And out of the blue, somebody calls me and says, "Hey, do you own this house?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Have you ever thought about selling it?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I'm getting ready to put it on the market." And he says, "I drive by it all the time. I'd love to take a look and talk to you." So he ended up buying the house, and we didn't have to involve real estate agents or anything. I didn't have to go through that whole process of, doing showings and open houses and the stress of selling a house. And then for my mom's house, we kept it as a vacation rental for a little while, but that was untenable. We were losing money on that. So when we decided to sell that house, the exact same thing happened. Somebody called me out of the blue and said, "Have you ever thought about selling this house?" And I was like, "I'm getting ready to sell it." And so in the span of a few years, I sold two houses without real estate agents, without listing or anything. And it was just like what I needed at the time because I had a lot of stressful stuff going on. It just simplified things so much. And when I was in the middle of it, I didn't really have time to think about how these things might happen, And even looking back, it's like it was, you could just say it was really good luck. But it struck me, after talking to some of the people that I've talked to, that maybe there's more to it than I want to put on it.
Yeah, I mean that almost sounds like more of like maybe like a religious. I don't know if you're religious or not, but like a religious type thing where like people say like they need help and then God, I don't know if you prayed or whatever, but like God kind of gave them the help. Which I mean, I don't really want to like shut down your experience, but like I normally would just be like, oh, it's probably good luck, which is also good to have, you know what I mean? But I mean, I don't know. Like
Yeah,
who
well,
am
and
I?
on some level, those are all kind of circling around the same idea. Like something happened because luck or God or something else helped you when you needed help. It wasn't, or maybe it really literally was just a super helpful coincidence. I try not to make any judgments about what is going on. I have thoughts, but I haven't really settled on conclusions.
Yeah. Are you like spiritual at all or anything like that? Like,
Not really, no. Although, the more I dive into this topic, the more I wonder if there might be more going on than, the universe is much more complex and interesting than I like to think. But yeah, I'm not at my core. I'm not a super religious person.
yeah. And then if you don't mind me asking, what did your wife I'm just kind of curious. What did your wife go to jail for? You probably don't want me to ask that question, but
Yeah, it's
it's a
because
personal.
my kids are affected. I don't want to give too much detail about that, but we'll just say that she is 10 years later, she's still in jail and she still will be for a while. So
Okay. Yeah, it didn't even matter, but I'm just curious and no judgments here. But yeah, so I haven't had too many people on. I had one guy on who really sounded like it's actually probably my bet. It's probably doing the best out of maybe all my at least on YouTube as of right now. But he has he was having paranormal experiences, but he was having more. It was kind of like a schizophrenic type thing where it was like um I forgot exactly the word, what you call it, but basically targeted individual syndrome, where he felt like people or something maybe from another dimension or something was kind of targeting him, and then he had all the noises in his or the I guess the people speaking to him like in his mind. He was like saying it was in him but not of him or something. So it was like there was no way for him to kind of realistically have known the things that they were talking about. So and then also he ended up saying that he saw white orbs, like when he was out in his backyard or whatever, he would see white orbs come to him. And I kind of just took that as being visions or maybe something with being schizophrenic. But he was like, no, I really do see these things. And I was like, well, if you're seeing them on a somewhat regular basis, I would hope that you would like record it. But and then I had another girl on who thought that she was literally taken over by like an alien. I don't know if you know what that is called or what that phenomenon is, but she literally thought her body had been like kind of taken over by an alien, which sounded a little bit too more extreme. But having talked to the guy and the girl, I definitely found interesting, and the guy, I was kind of like, there's got to be a way to get more information out of this than that we're having. Like in terms of like, for one, take out your camera and film it. Everybody has a decent camera now. I know most of the stuff happens at night, but then for two, if people schizophrenic people are hearing voices, and according to them, these voices aren't coming from within their own mind because they're talking about things maybe that they don't even know about. It seems like there should be more scientific kind of research going on, as I would imagine you probably agree. Would you agree with that? And maybe there is more than I kind of legitimate stuff that I know
Yeah,
about.
yeah. There actually is some interesting things going on some of these fronts. It's a little tricky because there's a stigma around these topics, right? Like if you are someone who does serious science and you decide you want to research this, you might not get grants. You might not get tenure as a professor or whatever. Like you might have some negative consequences because people look down on studying this. But just as an example, the University of Virginia has a program called I'm not going to be able to think of it, of course, now that I started, but they study particularly children with past life memories. So kids usually under the age of 6, they'll remember uh, their previous family or their previous life, and kids tell stories, and it's interesting, and it can be a little creepy when a kid starts talking about I used to my mom before you or whatever. But what's interesting about the studies that they do at UVA is um, some of the details that the kids provide are verifiable, right? So there's a couple interesting examples where there was one kid who talked about being a pilot in World War II and serving on an aircraft carrier, and he gave the name of it. He named the battle where he died, things like that. That's for a 4-year-old or something. That's really hard to explain away. And one of the things that they do when they research this is interesting. They'll, like they had a another kid who I saw this on a documentary. Basically, they brought him in because he was saying, "I remember this past life and I was murdered," and he had all these details. And so the researcher printed off pictures and maps and things, and they would have two examples. They would have a school where the murdered person had gone to school, and then they have another school that was totally unrelated, and they'd give him the two pictures and say, "Do you recognize either of these?" And he would pick the right one, and then they'd show a playground, and do you recognize either of these? And he would pick the right one again. And it's like, I don't know how to explain that. I don't know what is going on there, but it is super interesting to me. And that's kind of how that was one of the things that sort of started me down this path was watching that kind of a documentary, or like um, some of the UFO documentaries that are out. There's a guy named James Fox that has one called Moment of Contact that he's just re-released. That I try to come into it with um, a balance of skepticism and open mindedness, and my skeptic brain in some cases has a harder time discounting these things. One thing I do want to say, as far as my book goes, I did not try to be an investigator when I talk to these people. Like you see a lot of UFO or paranormal documentaries and things where they are trying to verify details, maybe look at photos or videos or employment records, whatever the story um, would require. I decided early on that there's a lot of people doing that already. I wanted to take a different approach. I wanted to just hear the story as the person experienced it, let them tell the story as it happened to them, and then talk about then what? Like what was their life? How was their life changed by these experiences? And not to say there's not a place for the investigative style. It's just that's that I decided that wasn't going to be my lane for this project.
you were just like coming in with an open mind. So like whatever they said, you didn't really question it. You were just like, oh, okay, like you just believed it pretty
Yeah,
much.
it was sort of, I not necessarily believed it. Although all the people that I talked to that made it into the book were very sincere and very believable, but I didn't try to say I do or don't believe any of the details. It was more like, I want to hear your perspective about what you experienced. And I'm going to, like, the way if you're watching a good movie, you suspend disbelief. You just say, okay, this is the world that I'm going into. It doesn't matter that these things don't seem realistic in my world. I'm going to just set that all aside and just listen and just basically act as storyteller. So um, that helped people to some extent let their guard down and trust me with the weirder parts of their stories sometimes. And like I said, everybody that I talked to in the that's in the book was nobody that is in the book came across as like telling campfire stories or um, making something up. It was more like, this is what happened, and you can believe me or not believe me, but this is my reality.
Yeah, for the most part, well, I mean, I would say it kind of depends on what it is, but for the most part, I tend to believe people um, when it comes to this type of stuff. But then there is some other stuff where like there's one podcast that I listened to only because the guy had like a comedy podcast before, and I don't know if you've heard of Otherworld. It's actually kind of like a popular podcast where
Yeah, yeah.
he interviewed. I don't know how much you get into this type of stuff. It sounds like you do, but that type of stuff, the what he goes over, which is more of like I guess paranormal experiences or whatever. And for whatever reason, like on I guess I just said like I normally believe people, but when I'm listening to that type of stuff, I, it's not necessarily I don't believe them. I like if I was to talk to them, I'd probably be like, okay, I believe that this really happened to you, but there's just something about it that I don't I'm not buying like the whole thing. I don't necessarily think they're making it up. But and the whole that's the whole thing is I don't really know why they would even be making it up. And a lot of times these people tell the same stories over and over again. So um
Yeah, well, and
yeah.
one interesting side note is when I talk to people, sometimes they are willing to tell me their story, but only if I change their name, change what town they live in, things like that, because they don't want attention about it. Like, they're telling the story in confidence, and then there's other people that are open and they're like, I have my own YouTube channel and this is what happened to me or whatever. So but it is always interesting to me when um, somebody's like, there's no plus side for me for sharing this story. It's just, this is what happened, and I'll talk to you about it. But if like one chapter in the book, it's a brother and sister who grew up in the Midwest and then moved to the South separately, but ended up in the same part of North Carolina. And one's a paramedic, one's a police officer, and they were like, "Yeah, you gotta anonymize us a little bit, because if I don't need my boss hearing about the things I see while I'm out on patrol, or the weird stuff that happens on the dark back roads of our rural area." So
Yeah. I mean it's the same thing with the it's kind of like the lead guy in who I'm forgetting his name. But the main guy he back in like the 80s or whatever, he worked in I think Texas somewhere.
maybe Bob Lazar,
Yeah,
is
exactly.
that the
Bob
guy? Yeah,
Lazar. So like when I pretty much listened to him on Joe Rogan, and like it seemed like he didn't really even want like it's obviously he's getting credit for what he's saying, but it seemed kind of like he didn't really want to be there. It didn't really seem like he was trying to sensationalize the story. He was just I guess just telling the same story he has this whole time. So
right.
it's
Yeah,
like what is he getting out of it? And I think that he actually is getting he's probably getting money off of it. I'm assuming. I don't really know, but
yeah. I don't know.
it's a yeah. What is he getting out of this besides just kind of coming off as that crazy guy who believes? And it's I tend to believe him. And then there's the guy he was with who made another guy who makes these documentaries. I'm forgetting his name. But yeah. So if you want, we can start with. Well, first of all, I had the question of as far as like when the government came out about a year ago and they said we are seeing. I think they call them. It's not even UFOs now, right? It's UAPs, right? Is the
Right,
technical
right.
term. When they came out and said that, what was their I mean, have they said at all what they think that it is? Do they have any
I,
idea?
they so it's interesting because over time their language keeps getting more vague, which means they probably don't know. They went from UFOs to UAPs. So instead of unidentified flying object, they're doing unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So they can count things that go into water, in the air, in space. And then also instead of saying, aliens, they're saying non-human intelligence. And I think even when the guy David Grush testified, he talked about, he somebody said the phrase extraterrestrial, and he was like, we don't like to assume anything. It could be any number of other theories. It could be, and I don't know what terms he used, but I've heard a lot of theories about maybe they're interdimensional, or maybe they are. I think the term they use is crypto-terrestrial. So they actually do live here with us, but maybe they live under the ocean or underground, or they keep out of sight. Sort of cryptid like. Maybe they're smart enough to not get in our way, or leave evidence behind. So I don't know what the government thinks, or if they make any assumptions. But it's interesting because one of the arguments against the extraterrestrial hypothesis is just, at least as we understand it, it's hard to travel from one star system to another. Like, it takes so long, and even at light speed, which nobody thinks is literally possible, all kinds of weird stuff happens when you go really fast, and time dilation and all that stuff. Um, and it creates these problems for that theory. For little dudes came from Zeta Reticuli and flew here. Maybe they did. Maybe they have some technology that we don't know about, or maybe there's some laws of physics that we haven't discovered yet, or who knows. But I think maybe that's why they were like talking about some of these other theories, because that would eliminate that distance problem. And it could be there's more than one answer. Who knows? I mean, it could all be our imaginations. There's so many possibilities that are hard to explain. Uh, and it's okay. In my mind, it's okay to say I don't know. You know,
Yeah. I mean, if you had to guess though, what do you think it is? If
Boy, that's a good question. Um, I I have sort of discounted the extraterrestrial version of this because of the reasons I said, because that distance and time light speed thing is tricky. I can't rule it out because we don't know everything. Every probably every generation in human history of thinkers and scientists, or whatever they were in their time, probably thought, we've almost got this all figured out. There's a couple more little details we got to work on, but just to cross some T's and dot some I's, and we'll have the whole universe figured out. And that's never been true. It's a much more complicated universe, with the James Webb Space Telescope out there finding things that they're like, well, that universe shouldn't be there. It's too big for how far away it is, or whatever. It, I think that just being a little more like humble about how much we know about the universe is kind of the stance that I've been taking. Is like, I, maybe we just haven't figured out what to measure, or what to look for.
yeah, that makes sense. And like getting into like the consciousness thing, I've been pretty into consciousness recently, and I don't know how into that you are, but like I don't know if you know like Daniel Dennett or like the like philosopher type guys.
No, I don't know that name, but
Yeah.
I've dabbled in this stuff a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, like I just recently kind of he believes so there's I could go off on a tangent on this, but I won't. But like there's materialism and then there's idealism, panpsychism. Panpsychism's like everything's conscious. idealism is like we are living inside of consciousness, so it's almost like we are like as if like we're living inside of like a dream or like a brain or whatever. And there's materialism, which everything's really here. So I think the materialist would want to say, okay, what exactly is the physical object that's there? But then there's other people who believe in idealism or whatever, that's like it's that we don't know really what it is. But Daniel Dennett believe he's an illusionist, so he doesn't really believe in, he doesn't think of consciousness in the way that we think of it. He thinks it's kind of like somewhat of an illusion, and like what we're seeing is really just kind of like when you see the world. I mean, we kind of know this to be true, that like when you see the world around you, it's not really how it looks. It's like we're just seeing like light rays, hit our eyes a certain way, and so we've made sense out of this world. But really, it's kind of just like we have no clue what it looks like, and I don't think that we really. So there's like what you're saying. There's so many more things that are going on that like we don't know about. It could,
Yeah, I think about like there's different. If we just look in the animal kingdom, there's you know critters that live in a dark cave that no longer have eyes because they don't need them, because if you take them up to the surface, they still can't see. Or a dog whose nose is like 100 times more powerful than ours, who can pick up a trail 3 days old of a person walking. Like there may be um, sensory. Well, we don't have the senses, but there may be something that we can't detect and we've never thought to detect that would tell us some fundamental truths about what we're surrounded by, or how the world works, or how the universe is, or whatever. I don't know if I'm rambling a little bit, but I think hopefully you get the idea that we don't know what we don't know. And maybe we'll have some discovery where we're like, oh, if we just take this new instrument that somebody invented and tune it to this uh you know signal or something, that will suddenly open up a whole new world of interesting data.
Yeah. And I found what you said about the kid, the 4 year olds like remembering a past life pretty interesting. And I have heard about those. The what do they call that? When like in Indian religion, like where like you can when you
Oh,
die,
like
like
a reincarnation.
yeah, I would imagine that's kind of like what's going on there. I would assume, right, where it's some sort of reincarnation, which we supposedly have real life accounts of people saying stuff, and then like them, like you were saying, kind of fact checking it, and it turns out to be true. So I think that that's pretty interesting. Is that what you think was going on there with those kids, was reincarnation basically, or could there be something else?
There could be something else. I mean, it could be that they're somehow picking up that some residual consciousness floating around out there. I don't know. I mean, reincarnation, it's interesting because in sort of the Western world, reincarnation is dismissed. But if you go to the other side of the world, it's assumed to be true, right? Of course that's Uncle Bob. That's, we all know that he came back as little Jimmy, whatever. So there are cultural assumptions that come with this sometimes too, that make it interesting when you talk to people from different places about their experiences, because maybe they put a different lens on how to interpret it. But I, I mean, I guess I would guess that reincarnation is the explanation for that, but I'm open to other possibilities.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to like get into the book, and you could go over like kind of like situations that happen in the book, or but that's the thing
Sure.
with
Yeah.
this type of stuff, is it almost kind of seems like where we're at for the most part seems like kind of we have stories, and then of people telling, whether they be true or false stories. That's the only problem that I kind of have with this type of thing, is it's kind of like it seems like we're at a spot where like we only have the stories. If there was some sort of way to analyze them or some other perspective maybe, but and don't get me wrong, I think the stories are very interesting, but you kind of see what I'm saying. Like, I don't really know if there's anything else we can do about it from a scientific perspective besides just kind of whether we trust the people or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess you can kind of look at it through maybe like anthropology or social sciences lens or psychology or something where you could sort of collect a lot of these stories and try and find the patterns. Like near death experiences seem to have some pretty universal elements. You know, each one is its own thing, but there's a lot of recurring themes. Is that because when people die, they go somewhere and they see they actually experience these things, or is that because of some, you know, chemical that fires off in the brain at the point of death? Or like there's there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. Maybe we'll never have answers to, but the sort of the overall patterns that we can pick up on, maybe they'll lead us somewhere interesting. Um, but yeah, this isn't. Yeah, my book is not a. I mean, we touch on science a little bit in the book, but mostly it's just sort of hearing people's stories.
Yeah, and at this point, are you fully full on a believer, or like are you still kind of like a skeptic coming from the skeptic place, but
I,
kind of believing, or
I think there's something there. What it is, I don't know. I think there's something to these experiences because there's certain elements that happen over and over again, and these a lot of times these are like life changing for people. Whether it's you know, they're having precognitive dreams where they dream something and then later on it happens, or like the near death experiences, or um, contact from people who have died that were important to them. Some of the UFO stories are really interesting, just sort of hearing the not just the experience that they had, but the information that they got from these beings that they interacted with in their experience. Yeah, there's a lot there, and I just try to leave the conclusions or the um, you know, how to interpret these stories up to the people reading the book at this point, because I didn't like 3 years ago, if you told me I wrote a book about UFOs and paranormal stuff, I'd have said you're crazy, but here I am. So
and is this what you're doing full time now, or do you have
no. I will tell you, sometimes you'll see in you know, online forums and stuff, people are like, oh, they're selling a book, they're a grifter or whatever. You don't make a lot of money from books. So I
yeah
have a full-time job. I do this as a little side project. Um, and it would take a long time to ever make a living doing this kind of work. Some people do it if you can, you know, if you have a big name, maybe you can do it. But majority of people that write books are not making their living this way, at least not significantly.
yeah.
So
Well, you said I thought you said you did do IT. Are you still doing IT, or what do you do?
mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I work in IT. So
Okay, so if you want, we can just go over. It seems like probably the best thing to do is to go over some of the stories in the book, or if you just want to cover everything kind of from a more general.
yeah, we can dive into some of the specific stories. I'm trying to think. Is there any particular angle that would be of interest? Like, because I can cover. I tr- I tried when I was writing the book. I tried to get a whole big swath of different types of experiences from a whole lot of different places geographically. Because I was trying to cast a really wide net and get as many different things as I could. So we can go in all different kind of directions.
Yeah. One thing I was going to wait till later, but I wanted to ask. One thing I saw on your post was that you went on the Where the Road Goes podcast. I think that's what it's called, Where the
Yeah,
Road Goes
yeah.
podcast. And when I a while ago I was looking up like what are some like really interesting podcasts, and I more meant kind of from a philosophical, like somebody who's just really good at like talking philosophically or whatever. And I think somebody posted that one, so I checked that one out, and I thought it was interesting. I kind of wanted, and I think that that's one of the bigger, as far as I know, I think that's one of the bigger ones podcast regarding this stuff. How was that experience? And like those guys seem to be pretty deep into it, right? So like,
Mhm.
did they have anything that like kind of surprised you, or
Um, I'm trying to think. Not really. I think we had a really long rambling conversation, kind of like this, but with coming sort of from the other side. You know, like you're coming at this as much more skeptical and analytical, and they were coming at it more like skeptical and analytical of anybody who doesn't believe this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to ask you about that one before I forgot. Yeah. So in from what I guess what I'm looking for would be, I don't know. It's tough, is with this type of thing. It's tough because, like I said, all you really kind of have to go on, it seems, is stories, and obviously, like you can. I think that like you can give your perspective on the story, and I find stuff like, even though I don't necessarily believe in a lot of this type of woo woo type stuff, I find it all pretty interesting. So if somebody has some sort of perspective that's interesting, an interesting take on things, I like that. But
Okay.
in terms of just the stories, like I said before, I'm into consciousness. So any type of, like, maybe I don't even really know what that would like really was would entail. Um,
I,
like I said,
uh,
are the NDEs I'm interested in too, because that kind of goes along with consciousness in terms of
okay. Yeah,
yeah.
let's jump into a couple of ones that seem to relate to that then.
But
Um,
I also am into really the aliens, anything really. So I don't want to shut anything out.
sure,
But
yeah.
I've had a couple. Sorry to cut you off, but I've had a couple guys on the podcast talk about NDEs in relation to idealism, which is basically, I think idealists tend to believe, I think, more in kind of like afterlife type stuff for whatever reason. So like they believe that like when we die, that's not it. Like your consciousness kind of floats on or whatever. Whereas materialists probably tend to believe in more of what you can see, touch, and feel. But anyways, yeah. So
Yeah,
go ahead and whatever story you found interesting, and if you had like a specific take on it or whatever.
okay. Yeah, so there's several we can pick from here. Let's go with Jamie. Jamie's story was interesting because um if you I hadn't heard of this term before I started writing this book, but in the near death experience world, there's something sort of a subset called walk-in NDEs, and Jamie's was an example of that, where she was in a bad spot in life. She was in this just awful relationship, abusive, in a crisis, really at the end of her rope, and um, she kind of was felt this draw to. She lived in the Appalachian Mountains, and she felt this draw to go up to the top of this mountain, and she did. And then on her way back, she saw a deer and found this rock that seemed to have some glow to it. I'm glossing over a lot of the storytelling aspects, but anyway, so she has this sort of semi spiritual like call to get out of her situation and go out of her house and wander in the woods. And then afterwards, she finds a church and she's like, I need help. I'm going to go to this church. It's the middle of the night. Um, I don't remember if the door was unlocked or if she found a key or something, but she goes inside the church thinking this is a sanctuary. And she's just felt this relief when she goes into the church. Um, and then the police show up and they're like, you're trespassing. You can't be here. And they don't know what's going on with her. So they basically arrest her, throw her in the back of a police car. When they put her in the police car, she kind of is either dumped or falls over so that her head is down toward the floor and her neck is kind of positioned in such a way that she can't breathe. And she basically suffocates and dies in the back of this police car. And then um, the next thing she remembers, the I don't know if I can swear on here, but the officer swears and is like, "Oh no, is she dead?" Um, and
You can
they
swear if you want.
okay. He says, "Oh shit" or something. Anyway, so um, they she's brought back to life. She doesn't remember a whole lot other than sort of these vague memories. But when she's back to life, she doesn't have that classic NDE memory with the white light and the being surrounded by loved ones, and the life review, all these classic elements of a near death experience. Um, but she feels like she's a different person. Like the way she puts it is like her soul left her body when she died, and a different soul came back into the body to take it over. And she talks about it as she describes it as Jamie 1 and Jamie 2, to differentiate between sort of before and after. She said the old Jamie was very career driven, loved to cook, cook big meals, very detail oriented. The new Jamie couldn't cook to save her life. Like she would burn stuff that was super easy. Uh, she didn't care at all about the career, um, but she wanted to go dancing, and she knew all the best places in town to go dancing. Um, you know, and she had kids who were struggling. They were older, like teenage or adult children, and they were kind of struggling with this because it was like, this isn't. I know I'm glad you're alive and I'm glad you're here, but you're not my mom. Like you're somebody else. And said kind of, I had to mourn the old you, even though you're still here, and that's weird. And she said, yeah, it's in her experience. She she said all of the memories of Jamie 1 were still with the body. She could remember all of the things that happened in the previous life, or the previous like version of herself or whatever, but she didn't have any emotions attached to him. It was more like scenes from a movie, that you could see and you could remember, but there was nothing attached to it in terms of the emotional side of it. Um, Whereas the memories that she created after this, she remembered all of it. And she said the reason she thinks she didn't get that classic NDE experience was because that was the other soul, that wasn't her. So that soul went up and remembers all that stuff, but that was outside of the body. So those memories didn't didn't end up with her, but all of the previous life memories did. And she would look back at some of those memories and be like, why was Jamie 1 so stupid? Why was she making these bad decisions? And it was a really interesting story of adjusting to this, like this experience of, I feel like I just stepped into a body quantum leap style, and I have to figure out how to live this person's life. And it's harder than I expected to try and make that transition. But she's, her life kind of settled down after that, and she's still trying to adjust. When I talked to her, she still had some things that she was trying to work through with her family and those relationships, because it got weird. But yeah, so that was one that was one interesting one that sort of ties into that, um, near death and consciousness, and maybe the soul or the consciousness or whatever leaves the body and goes somewhere, and maybe another one can step in. I don't know.
Yeah. Did she go, like, has she gone to like a doctor or anything, or a psychologist or anything like that, to like kind of get to answer maybe some of the questions? Or I mean, does she just fully believe?
I don't know. I don't know that we talked about that. I don't know if we talked about the that aspect of it. I didn't include that in the story. So when I do the interviews, sometimes I pick out the interesting parts and I forget some of the other details. So we may have touched on that, but yeah, I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, I always kind of come from it from like a skeptic viewpoint, which in a way I think can be like unsympathetic or whatever. And like, it's like, I mean, like this, I don't know. The same thing with like whatever anybody feels. It's kind of like if somebody feels, if they're like transgender or whatever, like they feel like they're really a man when they're a woman or whatever. And you kind of say, well, I don't believe that, or whatever it is, whether you believe it or not, it kind of comes off as unsympathetic to be like, well, I don't believe you. You know what I mean? So, um, yeah, because it's like, obviously if she's feeling that way, and people just tell her kind of like, well, I don't know. It's kind of like a hard thing to to deal with. Don't they call those, I feel like they have a name for that type of thing, which is kind of like a changeling or something. Like it's, I mean, it's different than that, but it's like I feel
So
like
I
there's
yeah
old
the
stories of like kids going away and then coming back sick or whatever, and they feel like they come back as a different person or something.
yeah, I mean the term that I heard was walk-in near death experience, but yeah, I haven't heard those other terms specifically in this context, um but yeah.
Yeah, I feel
Um
like changeling is something. It's like an old term for like. I feel like it's something had to do with like when their kid would get sick, they thought like they would like turn into a different person or something like that. But
yeah,
it just
yeah.
reminded me of that. But then also one other question regarding that one would be, what were the cops arresting her for? Was it just for trespassing in the church, or?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Um they might have thought that she was on drugs or something. She wasn't, but they might have, just misinterpreted the situation thinking it was a homeless person, a drug addict, something. But
It seems like
yeah.
kind of like a difficult way to die too. But I don't know. I'm being really like, obviously I'm being like really skeptical. But
Sure, yeah, and
yeah,
I one of the things that I did with this book was set aside that
yeah,
skeptical
okay.
aspect. So, um, yeah, another story that was interesting was there's a woman named Jasmine. She she has a lot of interesting um, elements to her story, but the one like been to she gets sort of um, drawn to certain places geographically, and when she gets there, so like she went to a place in Peru on a vacation, and she felt like she knew her way around this ancient ruin or whatever, like she had been there in a past life or whatever. But she had several of those type of experiences, but the really interesting one um, was her precognitive visions, where she will see something, and she gets these like dreams and visions a lot, and she'll put them in a journal. um, but what was interesting is that there were two specific cases where she put something in her journal and then later saw it on the news. So for example, she had a dream. I say dream or vision because I don't know. Sometimes they were waking visions and sometimes they were dreams, and I don't know that I remember specifically which way this was. But she woke up having seen like these uh, bodies that were in these giant, look like giant like pots, like these great big pots, and she drew the the image of like several bodies in several pots, and she didn't have any idea what that was about. And then a little while later, she lived in Toronto, Canada, and on the news there was a report of a serial killer. And he was a landscaper, and he was disposing of his victims in these giant landscaping pots, and then he would plant a tree on top of it so that they would hopefully never find the bodies. Well, they did find the bodies. And so she was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I get this vision, but I don't know what it means until after the fact. So it wasn't like a prophecy or a thing that could be acted on. It was just sort of, and she had another one that was sort of similar where it was like a specific intersection where she saw like bodies strewn across the ground, and that was when uh, later on there was a protest of some sort, and a car ran into the crowd, and um, you know a bunch of people were hit by this car, and several of them died. And she was like, again, I don't know what to do with this, but it's kind of a heavy weight to carry around when I keep seeing these things happen, can't do anything about it, and then when it really happens, I feel terrible that I couldn't do anything about it. So that was another interesting one.
Yeah, it seems like one of those things where like if like I don't really have any paranormal experiences, and I don't even think that I would really like want one, because or a lot of like on a regular basis because of that. It seems like it would be kind of like overwhelming to constantly be seeing things or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that one's um interesting. You almost wonder too if like she could do something like maybe go to the cops or something and like say, if there's any kind of way to like put it to use, be like, basically I saw this and maybe you could be looking out for, it's hard to
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
catch it before it happens, but
Yeah. And are the cops going to blow you off, or are they going to, is there going to be anybody there that would be like, okay, we'll take this seriously? It's hard to say, you know?
yeah, they're probably gonna blow you off. But I know that, from time to time they will go to psychics if they're like desperate or whatever. So you never know if they, if they're not desperate, but like if they just cannot, figure out a case, maybe they would go to somebody like that to try and get
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard of them occasionally using like the remote viewing techniques too, to see if they can track somebody down, or find something. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
and I've heard from people that like I just like once again I don't really believe in the I don't know. I don't really necessarily want to say I don't believe in any of it, but it's like I personally don't really believe in the remote viewing thing or the I forgot exactly what you call it, but like when you're I had two guys on when you're sleeping and like you kind of go outside of your body. What's that
Yeah.
called?
Yeah. So either astral projection or out of body experience.
Yeah, astral projection.
I don't know
And
if
like
those are the same, but
yeah, they were on and they seemed like two normal guys and like they said that they do it and you can like have it happen. So I have had a couple people on, and then also the remote viewing thing say that like the FBI or something, at some point was using remote viewing. I don't know if they still are, but so some of
so
the stuff.
yeah, I will say, with the remote viewing, I went to, I don't know if you've heard of the Monroe Institute.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, the one guy I had on brought he was actually talking about consciousness, but yeah, he brought that up.
okay, yeah. So I actually did a program there with a group, and it was really interesting. I did not have any kind of out of body experiences or anything, but or remote viewing or anything like that. I had some interesting experiences, but there was somebody in our group. This was pretty interesting. Um, so when you go to the Monroe Institute, they're teaching you basically, it's like meditation techniques with sound. And I don't know if you know binaural beats, that kind of technology. I think they kind of pioneered that. But anyway, you do these like guided meditations. You put headphones on. You're in a little pod. They call it a pod. It's like a little dark room that each person goes in, and we all do it at the same time. We're all listening together. The two instructors are in the control room, and they're playing the audio for all of us at once. They're just monitoring and whatever. But they had, later in the week, there was a surprise visitor coming to see us. And they were talking about that in the control room. And what was interesting is, so we do this meditation, and we come back and we all sort of do this debrief. We're all talking about, what, if anything, we experienced during that particular meditation program. And one of the people in the class was like, I saw you two, meaning the instructors, I saw you both in the control room talking to each other. And I heard you say this and I heard you say that. Yeah, yeah, we did say that. And I heard this part of this conversation. And then I could still see you, but I couldn't hear you. It was like somebody hit the mute button for a while. And then I heard you talking again. And it turned out that the muted part of it was when they were talking about the surprise guest that was coming to see us. So it was fascinating little snippet. Um, and the surprise guest ended up being a guy named Joe McMoneagle. I don't know if you've heard of him. Um, he was a remote viewer for the CIA. He's got some really incredible stories, some of which are online, some of which he told us separately. But he's like, if you want to do the remote viewing rabbit hole, look up Joe McMoneagle and listen to particularly his story about a Russian sub that wasn't supposed to exist that he supposedly was able to track down. So that
Oh,
was a
cool.
cool.
Yeah. And then were you able to see what the other guy saw too, or no? Was that
No, no, like I didn't have any of that experience, any of that kind of experience. I had my own interesting experiences, but nothing dramatic, nothing like that.
but were you able to hear them talking? Like,
No,
no, no.
no.
So the guy not only saw them but also heard them when you guys weren't able to. What was
Right.
your experience like? What did you what
So I had um probably the one of the more interesting ones. There was an exercise at the beginning, not the beginning, but earlier in the week where um you do this meditation, and part of it is you're supposed to be getting messages, three messages, and it's like a voice that's walking you through the process, and you get the binaural beats, sounds, and everything, and you go into this sort of meditative state, and you're supposed to get three messages. Well, our instructor said, I like to change this one up a little bit. You're not going to get three messages for yourself. You're going to get three messages for someone else, but you're not going to know who. It's not going to be decided until after the fact. But just whatever you get, just write it down. And then afterwards, we'll get back together and we'll tell you whose messages go with who.
but it wasn't like necessarily said to you. It was just kind of like like
Like in your
audio,
head. Yeah.
like
It was,
noises, but you were able to hear something through the noises, or did somebody actually say the message?
no, nobody says anything. I mean, they're saying they're like talking through the meditation, but there's not like somebody giving you messages through headphones or something. It's more like in your head. And different people experience it different ways. Sometimes people literally hear a voice. Sometimes you just imagine something. They said just take whatever you get. If your mind wanders, whatever, just write it down. It could be anything. Um, Sometimes people have whole conversations in their mind that they can feel like they hear the back and forth, or they see somebody, or there's all different ways that it can be there. And yeah, it's just in your head, right? This is partly, it's just your imagination. That's the skeptic view, is just your imagination running wild, right? But then when we came back, and that one of the instructors had paired everybody up. Well, it wasn't really paired up, because I was supposed to give my messages to one person, and then a different person was supposed to give their messages to me. So it wasn't like you and I are giving to each other. It's like I give to you and you give to somebody else and somebody else gives to me. So sort of round robin style. Um, and
But I mean,
I
like,
didn't,
did you feel like when whatever messages you were getting, they said to give to somebody else? Did you feel like everything was planned in a certain way, or like was it just kind of like they just kind of like were like going with it?
so
Or, you know what I mean? Like,
you mean when I was talking to the person who I had the messages for,
or
or
like you said, the people were once you got the message, they said that they were going to have you give the message to somebody else.
yeah. So when I was in the meditation, I just had some visuals. I had like I don't remember exactly. I have to check my notebook, but I had um, some visuals, and I had some like words that I wrote down that just came to me, and I didn't know what they meant. I didn't have any context. It was just sort of like, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm gonna just let my mind go wherever it goes, and I'm gonna write down what I get. And um,
So
then when I
there really was no guaranteed message. It was just whatever came out of you at that time,
right,
basically. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so then, and I want to be careful because I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail because I don't have permission from the people that were involved. But the person that was, I had three things written down on my piece of paper, and I had some little doodles and stuff that had come through as I was doing this meditation. And I went up to her and I said, I don't know what this means, but here's what I got. And I told her, and it was like specific colors and specific phrases. And I was like, does this mean anything to you? And she was like tearing up at how specific it was to her. Like, she's like, I don't know how this would apply to anybody else but me. And then when the guy who had my name came to me, he told me really specific things about my job and my work situation, and something specific about my health. And then he said the other thing was weird. He said, he was like, "Do you know what stigmata means?" And I'm like, "I think so. Is that the sort of the saints that get like the wounds of crucifixion, like holes in their hand or whatever? Is that what that is?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, "I had a image of that in my head," and I was like, he was like, "I don't know what that's supposed to mean." Well, I had just had uh, surgery on a broken wrist, and I had this big scar on my wrist, and I was like, "Could it be this?" And he goes, "Yeah, I guess it could be." So it wasn't like life changing, but it was like that was pretty cool. It was like I don't know what just happened, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And what he had told me about my job situation was accurate. The health thing, I guess I should talk to my doctor to find out. But so that was one of the more interesting exercises for me. The other thing that happened at Monroe.
What did he say about the health thing? If you don't, I mean, whatever you don't want to
Oh,
give it.
yeah, he said I need to be careful about. Um, I think it was sodium. I wrote it down. Something to do with sodium and something to do with. I can't remember. I guess I need to go look that up and talk to my doctor to see if it's anything. But that
Yeah.
one, I you know, I don't want to talk to my doctor, but
Yeah.
I probably
I
should.
know. Yeah, I know for me it's like I sodium is, they told me last time I went in not to have salt. So that makes sense. What about the job thing if you're able to give that?
Oh, I had a I don't want to go too deep into that, but I had a stressful situation at work that I thought had no good resolution. I was like, I don't want to change jobs. I don't like the situation as it is. Some things were changing and I was like stressing about it. And I was like, there's nothing to do about this. I'm just gonna either have to suck it up and dislike my job more, or I'm gonna have to find a different job, which I don't want to do. And then a resolution came along that fixed that problem for me to where my stress got to go away. So um
And the
and he
guy
got
told you the resolution, or it just ended up
he just
him?
he just said, I felt like there was something that you were really stressing about at work. And he went into a little bit of detail about it. And then he said, you don't have to worry about that. It's going to be resolved pretty soon. So it wasn't, it wasn't like super specific, but it was specific enough to be interesting.
Yeah. And then what was
Um,
the next thing you said that you were going to go over another thing that happened there?
oh, yeah. The other thing wasn't related to um, the Monroe Institute program specifically, but um, I'm trying to think how much background to give you. Have you heard of a guy named Chris Bledsoe?
I don't think so. Maybe,
Okay.
but
So he wrote a book and he's been on a couple documentaries because he he has a whole story that I'm not going to get into, but one of the interesting things about him is he's like a UFO experiencer, sort of. Um, but he can go outside almost any night and sort of see these orbs in the sky, and he will do it with other people there all the time. In fact, sometimes he'll go down to there's a beach in I live in North Carolina and he lives several hours away, but down by the coast. And he'll do these events once or twice a year where he'll go out and skywatch on the beach at night with a group. And he'll sometimes he'll even be like, okay, there's going to be one coming from up over here. And here comes a light. And he'll be like, thank you. Can you get brighter? And it'll get brighter. And um, the one night I was there doing that with him and his group, we must have seen, I don't know, 100 plus of these lights that didn't behave like planes and they didn't behave like satellites. Like they were changing direction or um, changing color, changing brightness. So that was really interesting. But some of the people at Monroe were actually, most of the people at Monroe were people that had been to one of these events or more with Chris Bledsoe. And they were like, we're going to go out tonight and do sky watching. And we were out there for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, and there was just nothing going on. There was planes and there were satellites going over, and we are like, oh, there's something. Oh no, never mind. Oh, there's something. Oh no, never mind. And we were all kind of just chatting. We were just socializing at night. It was nice out. And then after about an hour and a half, some people went to bed, and the rest of us were just standing out there talking. And then all of a sudden, in this one part of the sky, we started seeing all these different lights. And what was super interesting was they would sort of be making requests. Like, one person said, can you get brighter? And the light would get brighter, and then it would dim again. And then somebody said, can you make a triangle? And here comes one light with two lights underneath it going by together in sync. And it was like, whoa, that's really weird. And then we saw one that was, it wasn't off in the distance in the sky. It was closer to us, and it was near a tree, and it was a blinking light that went up in a spiral. And it just then kind of zoomed off. One person saw it go around behind us or something. And we were like, okay, that was blinking too fast to be a firefly, and fireflies don't really spiral like that. And it's not a plane or a helicopter, because it wouldn't be that close. And we didn't know what to make of it, but like probably 8 or 10 of us saw it. We got it on camera with a night vision scope. And then what got really interesting was the next morning we were talking to some of the people who had gone to bed. They missed it, right? They weren't out there for it. And we were like, we'll show you the video later. It was really cool. There were these red lights, and somebody else, I don't remember the sequence, but one person said red, another person said blue, another person said white. And we're like, how can that be? How can they all be? How we all saw it? We got it on camera. We were all there. Why did we experience it differently? Like, why did I see red and you saw green? That doesn't make any sense. So that was really interesting. And the people that worked there had told us that they call those fairy lights. They said that sometimes we see these fairy lights. And so that whole experience was pretty wild and pretty interesting. It was a lot of fun. I don't know what to make of it. It was cool. But yeah, I can't explain it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the only way to be able to explain it would be, which I'm not saying I think this, but it's like if somehow the guy had it like, I don't even know how he would do that, but like somehow had it like rigged. Either that, yeah, or like, where he somehow had like a drone or something like do it, which I don't think that, because there would be no way of like instantly changing whatever it is, the lights or whatever. I feel like I've heard something like about that, going to a beach and seeing the.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if it was on like Joe Rogan or something. I don't know. Has this guy ever been on like a Joe Rogan or something like that? Because
I
I mean,
think he's going to be on Joe Rogan. I don't know if he has already, if it's aired or not. I think he's talked to Joe, and I don't think it's aired yet, but I might be wrong. He's been on. He was on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. He's got, I don't know what else he's got. He's got a book out that tells his whole story. That's not just about these orbs. I know he was at a UFO conference one time and was talking about this, and he stopped in the middle of his talk and said, "Hey, they're outside right now. Do you want to go see them?" Because he can somehow sense them. And yeah, and they took him. The Skinwalker, Beyond Skinwalker, took him out to like the Florida Everglades, where there was not really, and they didn't tell him where they were taking him. They just sort of took him out to the middle of nowhere, and sure enough, they got some of these orbs on camera, different colors and stuff, and they were like, pretty sure he can't, have known where we were going to take him, and sent some drones out there or whatever. They also hooked him up to like, I don't remember what you call it, but the sensors on your head, and monitored his brain waves while this was happening. And they found that the brain waves were similar to like uh, like a Buddhist monk who's really advanced at meditation will get those same brain waves, things like that. So it's a really interesting story. It's a really interesting guy. He's nice as can be. I've met him a few times, and he's super nice and super sincere. He's got a sort of a story or a cosmology around these orbs. They're to him they're spiritual in nature. Um, but yeah, that's all I can tell you about that. I don't know.
So he's somehow able to almost like not only know that they're there, but almost able to like summon them, kind of.
Yeah, he says the way he phrases it is he's not summoning them, he's just inviting them or asking them to come. Um, like he can't call them in, he can just sort of request that they come. And he says it usually takes a while before they show up. Like it's not like he can instantly be like, "Come on." But yeah, he's done a number of podcasts. I think he was on um gosh, I can't think. Sean Ryan and Danny Jones, and I can't think of which other ones, but yeah, he's been doing a lot of interviews about this. And usually when he does these interviews, he'll be like, "Can you come Skywatch with me before we do the interview so that you can see what I'm talking about?" Like he wants to show people this beforehand.
And
Um,
what does he think they are in terms of spiritual, like just some sort of spiritual?
yeah, I mean, he says so. He was raised some kind of evangelical, like Pentecostal or Baptist or something like that, some very um, sort of evangelical Christian, but he's not that anymore. But he uses some of the terminology. I don't know what he would consider himself in terms of spirituality, but I think he refers to them just as like angels or orbs or spirits or lights. Like he changes up the terminology, but um, he says there you he can pray for them to come or he can invite them to come. He puts out like feelings of love and joy, and that attracts them. But yeah, and part of his experience involves encounters with various beings. One of which is he just calls it the lady, um, and she's sort of like a sort of like the Virgin Mary apparitions that you hear about sometimes in some of the Catholic lore, but he's not Catholic either. So, but he talks about this experience that was very moving for her, and one of his early experiences involved him, his son, and three other guys that were out fishing. Um, and so there's a lot to his story. I don't want to go all the way down all of his whole tale, but it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Do you know if he's been on Lex Friedman? For some reason, I feel like it might have been Lex Friedman that brought. Maybe he just brought him up or something. That he,
I'm
if
not
you know who
sure.
Lex Friedman is.
I'm not sure if he's been on that one or not.
Okay. And then in terms of the back to the Monroe Institute one, that the other guy was telling me that I guess there's like a Monroe Institute app that you can use and you can. So I actually looked for the specific Monroe Institute one. It seems like there was a bunch of binaural beats ones. I don't know if I found the exact Monroe Institute one, but I didn't even try it. But I'm kind of curious to try it. When you use it, is it all pretty much just audio kind of noises that like send you into like a meditation, or what does it do
So
exactly?
yeah, there's sort of so there's the app which has some guided meditations on it, and then there's some so with the Monroe system or whatever, they've tried to take any all of their terminology is very generic. Like they've taken any words out that might indicate some kind of religion, because you hear about things like transcendental meditation or astral projection or things like that. They neutralized all of the vocabulary, so it's like this recording is going to do focus 10 and this recording is going to do focus 12, and they explain to you what focus 10 means or focus 12 means. um, and if you go to the Monroe Institute, you get they teach you this whole sort of protocol for how to do these meditations, whereas the app is more just sort of like they use the sound technology, but it's more like guided meditations, like you're walking in the woods and just sort of like visualizing something while you meditate. The way the as I understand it, the way that the binaural beats things works is like they're trying to stimulate certain types of brain waves. So like let's say that they want to stimulate a 5 hertz brain wave. Well, if you play 5 hertz in headphones, you're not really going to hear it. But if you put, say, 100 in this ear and 105 in this ear, that slightly out of sync thing creates a 5 hertz like rhythm in your brain. And you can actually, when they do it, you can actually kind of sense that 5 hertz sort of in the background. And they've, according to their system, different frequencies can stimulate different brain waves, and those brain waves can help you get into these different focus levels, which serve slightly different purposes. There's they have 10, 12, 15, 18, 21. I think it goes up into the 40s, but you got to go to a bunch of courses to get to those. You can also buy their audio program, but I don't know, it's pretty expensive to buy it. But the app has some interesting options, and it's not bad. I mean, if you want to do meditation, it's not free. I think there's a free tier, but for some of the more advanced stuff, you do have to pay a monthly subscription. But this is the
Okay,
world.
if you're able to send me the app, it's like I said, it seemed like there was a bunch of binaural beats ones, but then I
Yeah,
couldn't.
the app
I
is
mean, I didn't
called
take too much time, but I couldn't find the exact one that he was talking about. The
yeah, the app is just
binaural.
called Expand. So
Okay,
if you look for the Expand app,
okay. Um, and then what? I mean, what exactly is it? Like, are you using it? I know you went there, but like, do you use it like now?
yeah, I don't use it as often as I want to, just because what happens to me a lot of times is I just fall asleep, like, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I guess, but um, it I was falling asleep at the Monroe Institute sometimes too, and missing out on whatever guidance they were trying to give me. But yeah, I
Kind
do
of like
still use
almost
it.
in a good way though. Like it's almost like it's so relaxing that it like puts you to sleep type thing.
Yeah, yeah. So just to give you a sort of an idea of the way that the they start you out is um, they explain the concept of the two different tones in the two different ears causing the brainwave thing, and then they have you do you they want you to imagine a box. So they have a name for it. It's called an energy conversion box, which is a little clunky for me, but you imagine this box, and then you take all of your thoughts, all of your worries, all of your concerns, all of your ideas, everything, and put it in that box, and you're going to save it for later, and including your physical self. You're going to put like in your meditation, the physical part of your body is going to go into your box, and then they have you do the next stage, I think, is what they call resonant tuning, which is sort of a humming thing that you don't strictly have to do, but it's supposed to create resonance in your body. And then there's sort of this affirmation that they want you to do that is about uh, sort of I'm more than my physical body, and um, I can't remember the parts of it. There's kind of these 4 parts of it that are sort of like I want guidance, I want help, and after that you go into focus 10 with they change the tones or whatever. You go into focus 10, and then you kind of start out the same way each time, but then from that point on, there's different meditations that may take you to different places in your mind, or have different goals or things like that. So there's a lot of like descriptors. Sometimes it'll just be quiet for a while. And it was funny because sometimes it would be quiet for a while and I'd fall asleep, and then I'd wake up to somebody talking again. So, but it's part of it is the explanation of the protocol they want you to follow that I suspect is based on some combination of religious teachings that may or may not overlap. Sort of those. Uh, a lot of religions have these sort of esoteric traditions that aren't widely used, but I feel like they're pulling from several different places and then taking all the terminology out. And then the sound is the other part that is stimulating these brain waves to get you into these states. You can do one or the other or both at the same time, kind of, and different people have different results. So, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like it's more of like a psychological thing, or maybe like you said, even like a religious thing than what I'm thinking of, which is more of, or like what we're talking about, which is more of like a paranormal. Am I
Well, yeah,
wrong? Like it almost seems like it's
no,
like
yeah,
trying to guide you into like relaxing meditation as opposed to like maybe like
yes and
you're
no.
actually seeing things or like
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, there's so the whole reason that the Bob Monroe is the guy that the Monroe Institute was named after, because he came up with these techniques, and he was a longtime sound engineer, and he found that found this by accident, where he was going out of body and seeing himself from the corner of the room or whatever, and he was like, this is weird, what's happening? And so over time he sort of figured out this. I think he said there was at one point he was on a plane and the rotors on the plane were slightly out of sync, and he noticed it was the same kind of effect. And so he was trying to piece all this together, and over time he figured out this thing, and then the CIA was like, we want to hear more about this, and so they showed up and started teaching the out of body and remote viewing stuff. Is sort of some of the things that you can get into with the Monroe tapes. And you can theoretically, some of the higher levels, you can talk to some other entities, some other non-human intelligence. And if you go out and look at some of the CIA documents that have been declassified, they talk about this stuff too. And they're, it's really interesting to see the CIA's take on the Monroe Institute and the out of body stuff, decades after the fact.
yeah, it kind of reminds me of I don't know if you've watched the show Pluribus at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you watched? Did you watch the whole thing?
I haven't gotten through the whole thing, no, but yeah, I've watched at least half of the episodes.
Yeah, I like it. I don't know if you know, but it's like the Breaking Bad creator, and Breaking
Yeah,
Bad's like my favorite show of all time. So obviously, I watched this one and I liked it, but I kind of liked it from so far because they haven't really gone too far into exactly what it is. They've kind of gone into it a little bit, but it's like overall, it's kind of like what you're saying a little bit in terms of some sort of audio. The aliens or whatever sent us some sort of audio. I mean, honestly, I can't even really explain it. And then somehow the scientists were able to kind of like put the audio into. I can't even really explain it. Actually, I don't
right.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know what I mean.
Right,
Um,
right,
and it's kind of similar to this, where it's like we're not really getting aliens. You're getting kind of like an audio signal that is turning all the humans on Earth into a hive mind, essentially.
right. And what's interesting in going through, like, writing this book, that I don't want to say hive mind, but maybe you would call it like mind to mind or telepathy, comes up over and over again, where um, people, whenever they interact with aliens, it's never spoken. There's not English words passing back and forth between the person and the alien. It's always in their head. They hear the alien projecting these thoughts or whatever. And the same with sometimes some of the paranormal stuff, you get that. And some of the uh, NDE stories, you get that, where the person just knows. They don't hear words, they just know this thing. And so that's interesting because that show kind of takes that element too, where it's like nobody has to talk to each other. They just can, they all know the same things, like a collective consciousness or whatever. One person does something and all the rest know they did it. That's an interesting element to it that has my curiosity up, but I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, which supposedly, I mean, ants are kind of similar that way. I don't know if they're actually like communicating to each other by telepathy, but essentially they're all working on the same goal without basically speaking to each other. I don't know how much you know
Right.
about any type of like, you know, real animals that are kind of almost, I mean, some of the animals we have here on Earth are almost alien, like octopuses or like even spiders are pretty crazy. And we really don't even know what's going on with the ants. They're saying like with the birds, how they're like flying in a certain way. It's some sort of potentially I don't know if it's telepathy, but like somehow they're communicating with each other to all fly
Right.
a
Right.
certain
Yeah.
way, like hive mind.
And schools of fish, you kind of see that too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And I don't know if, have you heard of or listened to the Telepathy Tapes podcast? That was a really interesting one.
No, I heard about it and then I feel like somebody said that it was debunked. I feel like somebody told me it was debunked, but then somebody else told me that it wasn't. I'm assuming you probably don't think it is, right? Like do you believe in
Well,
it or
they it's going to be interesting because they've got a documentary that's supposed to come out later this year where they put it through a scientifically rigorous testing process. So that'll be interesting because with the podcast, I don't know that it was debunked. It was just sort of like I don't think it was like, oh, we figured out how they're doing it. It was more like this doesn't make any sense. This can't be real kind of debunking. Like there's maybe the person was signaling somehow or whatever, but it's it's pretty compelling to me because they did a lot. Now this wasn't in a scientific context, but if the kid is sitting in one room and the mom is in a different room and the mom's looking at colors and the kid can name the colors from a different room, that's pretty interesting, you know. um, or if you know the kid can put on a blindfold and sort things by color with a blindfold on, that's interesting. I want to know more about that. And the fact that they are trying really hard to replicate this, whatever this is, in under scientific conditions tells me that, like, if you were a scam artist, one, I have a child who's autistic and nonverbal. I've never had any telepathy experience, but I know that running a scam would be exhausting because you've got your hands full already. But if they were running a scam, they probably wouldn't be running off to science labs to try and be debunked. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that I have come to any conclusion completely, but it's compelling. And it'll
yeah,
be
I
interesting
have
to see what they come out with.
yeah, I have no clue either way and I didn't even listen to it. I feel like either somebody on a podcast I was listening to, or it might have even been somebody on this podcast like told me it was debunked. And I feel like the guy who also told me about the Monroe Institute, I think, told me it wasn't, but I could be mixing things up. So I have no clue
Yeah,
whether it is or not. I mean, it sounds like
it,
it's pretty legit from what I've heard the podcast is, but
it's really, to me, it's really interesting and really compelling, and it's I'm glad that they're going further with it. I'm glad that they're trying to get like double blind, like top notch
yeah,
scientific study out of it to see if they can figure out what's going on, because it's that would be groundbreaking, you know.
well, I feel like that's what should be done. And it sounds like maybe they're a big enough podcast to where they can do that. Like you said, if one person goes to the cops or whoever, the science community, and tells them I've visions or whatever, they might not believe it. But if you have a whole group, and I know there's a lot, I forgot where I've heard this, but there's a massive group on, like, obviously you probably know, on Reddit, that is like, I forgot what the subreddit is for it, but like whether it be paranormal activity or I feel like there was like a specific one that I heard about where there was a ton of people. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of people on each individual one, but
Mhm.
like it may have been the one that guy was on, which was I always forget the name of what he called it, but basically, paranormal activity, I guess, would be the overall. Yeah, there's a ton of people on these subreddits who, if they all kind of said, "Hey, there's like thousands of people or hundred, however many people there are seeing things, let's look into it." You know what I mean? As opposed to just being like scientists do and brush it off. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if you wanted to tell any more. If you had, I didn't want to like cut off the stories you were telling. I don't know if you had any more stories you wanted to tell.
Oh, yeah, we can, let's see. What's another good one?
Because we kind of got away from that. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
that's
Yeah,
I'm cool with wherever we go. You know,
yeah.
I'm any of
I
it
just
is
wanted to make sure
interesting.
if there was any more that you wanted to tell, and then
Let's
overall,
see.
like I just want to know your thoughts on how many stories did you get in total?
So there's somewhere around 20 altogether. So the way the book is structured, I've got an introduction where I kind of give what I'm trying to do, and then each chapter is one person's complete story, and I'm writing it as a storyteller, not as like a journalist or something. Like I'm not dramatizing it or sensationalizing it. I'm trying to get it as accurate as I can, and I do go back and forth with the people that I talk to. Like I'll send them a draft and say, "Did I get it right? Do you need me to change anything? Is there anything that's doesn't seem accurate, or do you want me to anonymize or leave something out?" And then at the end, when it was almost time for the book to come out, I kind of gave them another chance to review it. And some people decided they didn't want to, they were like, "I'm not ready for my story to be out in the world, so can you take me out?" And yeah, no problem. um, but then there were some stories that were interesting but not long enough to be a whole chapter, so I've got one chapter at the end that's sort of smaller ones collected together, that were interesting but not long. So there's
But
probably about 20 altogether.
is the whole book basically just these stories, or like do you give any insight or any personal kind of
It,
outlook? I guess.
yeah, so it's mostly just the stories. There's a chapter at the end, the conclusions, where I try to tie it together and say, here's, what I've taken away from this, and what warrants more study, and maybe what kind of direction we can go with it. But I try to leave it open. I try not to put my insights into the individual stories too much. I want them to stand on their own, because I want the reader to be able to have the experience themselves, and kind of make their own decisions about what they make of all this.
Yeah. Have you thought about this in podcast format? I would think would be really good. Like I said, that other world one, basically he just interviews the people, but it's surprising because most of it's not even him talking. It's just it's the person telling their story. So he'll like start it
Mhm.
off and then ask them a few questions, and then they'll just kind of go on with their story. But I feel like a podcast version of this would be like really. I would almost think that it would like for sure do good. Have you thought about turning it into like a podcast?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and I like the writing part of it. The podcasting, I think, I'm hesitant to go down that path, not because it wouldn't work well, but because there are people that will share their story with me and let me share it to the world, but they don't want to be on a podcast. Like they don't want their themselves out there. And partly it's just writing is something I really enjoy, and podcasting is not quite as much in my wheelhouse. You know what I mean? It's like that feels more like work, where writing feels more like a hobby and a fun thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I won't ever do that, but for now, I'm working on a second book of similar structure, where I'm just looking for more stories to tell, and maybe see if it leads me to any more interesting conclusions.
Yeah. Was there any, if you want to tell like maybe one more story, I mean, it's up to you.
Sure, yeah. Sean, which is I think chapter 4, was a really interesting one. So he had a near death experience. The one thing I will say is there seems to be um, a some kind of trauma through line in a lot of these stories. He was going through a traumatic time. He was like his business was falling apart, his marriage was falling apart, his finances were a wreck, he was a wreck, and he was trying to, I think he was doing a remodel job on a house to sell it to try and make some money. And while he was working on this house, it might have been his own house, I don't remember the details, but um, he was working on a house and he was going to do some painting, and he was prying a paint can open with his pocket knife, and the knife slipped and basically slit his wrist. Like he was, and he had been a paramedic, and he knew at first he was like, I'm just going to put pressure on it, I'll be okay. But he knew before too long that he was in trouble based on the amount of blood that was coming out. And so he let his wife know that she needed to call paramedics, that he was in trouble. He made it out to outside to wait on them, but then just sort of slumped to the ground and was laying in a pool of blood. And next thing he knew, he could see himself from above, and he didn't realize it was him. He was like, "Man, that guy looks rough. That's not good." And then he has this whole near death experience where um, he said he ended up in this field, this meadow with butterflies and flowers and a tree and a little brook. And he said there was like music playing. He was like almost laughing because he was like, it felt so on the nose. It was like so cliche. It almost seemed like cartoonish how idyllic this experience was. He was like, this can't be real. But he said it felt more vivid than real life. He was like, this is realer than real. And then these beings came and they took him to this huge library and took him to this podium where they had a screen, and it was showing. Uh, he described it like a tree structure, where it was each branch point was a decision he made in his life, and so there was the decision he made, and then the alternate decision would be a different branch. And so his actual life was one path through the tree, but then there were other paths that he could have taken. And he said um, he was seeing the events of his life sort of as this tree image was navigating. But what was interesting was he was not experiencing his own feelings or emotions about that point, but how it affected other people. So if he hurt somebody by his decision, he would feel their pain and discomfort or sadness or anger or whatever. Um, so each decision, if it made them happy, he would feel their joy or whatever. But um, he said it felt like a teaching tool where it was like he was trying to, they were trying to show him, your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for other people. And you get to feel what you made them feel. Um, and then after that, they kind of, I'm glossing over a bunch, but after that, they kind of said, you can stay here in this, you know, paradise, or you can go back. Um, it's up to you. There's no wrong answer, but he was just thinking about his family and how he wouldn't get to see his kids grow up. And next thing he knew, he was back in his body and was kind of a mess because he had lost so much blood. And the doctors told him the amount of blood he lost, he probably should have died. His blood pressure was so low that his chances of survival were, 3% or something. But they were able to bring him back. And he said after that experience, um, he did change the direction of his life. He said he used to be very like narcissistic and selfish, and afterwards because of the life review, he was like, I can't be like that anymore. I can't keep doing these things that are just about me. But what's interesting is that he also then started having these weird like UFO experiences. He would see UFOs and his family would see them, except for his wife. She would always not be willing to look, but he would see them. His kids would see them. Uh, she would be like, no, I don't care. Um, and that was interesting to him because his grandfather and his mom had stories about seeing UFOs when they were kids. He eventually called his mom, and his grandfather was no longer alive at this point. But he said, Mom, do you have my grandpa's journal and about his weird UFO experiences? And she was like, yeah, let me find it. And she told him she found it. Come over and get it. he gets to her house to get it, and she opens the door and she's like, "You're in it." And he's like, "What? You're in your grandfather's journal?" And it's because his grandfather had mentioned him that Sean was probably at some point going to start experiencing these things. And interestingly enough, he did. His grandfather had a really weird story about, so he worked for like the Forest Service in Alberta, somewhere in Canada. I think it was Calgary. I don't know. Anyway, he worked for the Forest Service. So it was him and his partner out in the woods surveying trees and doing whatever they did for the Forest Service. And one summer, his partner was swapped out for another guy that nobody had seen before. And this guy would ask him weird questions about why do humans have wars, and um, what happens when you get hurt? How do you treat the pain, and how do you, like, asking these really weird questions that people would know, like, why are you asking these weird questions? And at the end of the summer, that guy left. His old partner came back, and nobody ever said anything more about it. And he was like, in his journal, he was talking about how he thought that guy was not from around here, and he didn't mean from Alberta. He meant he was from some other world or something. But and Sean hadn't had any like UFO experiences that dramatic. He would just see things in the sky that didn't make sense, and sometimes he would smell the smell that his grandfather described. It was like a metallic smell sometimes, and then he would have a little bit of lost time, and he didn't really know what to make of it at this point. But uh, he said it was really interesting reading all of his grandfather's old stories about the weird things that happened to him.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Yeah, that part about going the separate ways or whatever, like the tree branches. There is a thing like that in like quantum physics. I don't know how much you know about quantum physics, but basically they say where there's like a multiple worlds theory or whatever, where every
Yeah,
time
yeah,
the it's hard for me to even explain, but basically every time the you might be able to explain it better than me, but
but yeah,
it
like just like those decision points sort of branch off and two different, like, parallel timelines or whatever.
yeah, so like there could, just reminded me of that. So like there could potentially be, a universe where like I go this way, there could be a universe where I go that way, and there's like almost unlimited possibilities, which is really
Well,
interesting.
yeah, and what one interesting little tidbit that I didn't mention is that he said that sometimes the branches would then converge back together to a major life event. So he was like, almost like, I couldn't have avoided this particular incident. I could branch off and branch off and branch off, but all roads led back to a big event or something, or at least three-quarters of them led back to the big event, and maybe there was one little strand that went off another direction. But that was an interesting little uh, twist to that concept of the parallel worlds or whatever, was that sometimes they can converge back, at least in this visualization that they showed him.
Yeah, I mean it's just crazy to think of how many decisions you make every day, or how many things happen to you every day that could potentially, you know, how how different outcomes. There's so many different potential outcomes that could happen. If you go this way, this will happen. If you go that way, that'll happen.
Yeah, and I
Um,
always wonder about sort of the trivial level detail. Like, if I put my left sock on first or my right sock on first, did I just split into parallel universes, or is it too minor to have an effect? I always wonder about that.
yeah, I would imagine that it would be too minor, but who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Anything could affect it. Um, yeah, I mean, there's some theories too that like where we don't even have free will, which is actually kind of like a standard theory in like science, where like or philosophy, where like we don't really have free will. We're just kind of like essentially, billions of years of evolution or whatever. And then at this point, like you didn't choose to be you, I didn't choose to be me, and then it's like I didn't choose to be a male living in California at this time, and so
right,
many things are just kind of like you're just like, but it definitely doesn't feel that way. Like it definitely feels like I'm making decisions every day. But
right.
but yeah, But they say that what I've heard is that like when like any random decision you make, like that one, whether it be the left sock or the right sock, just doesn't really matter, or it's like, it's
The outcomes are the same either way, kind of. Yeah.
yeah. Um and it really might not even be you like making a decision. It just is what it is. Yeah, so you mentioned the high strangeness, and I think that I'm not exactly totally sure what that means, but I kind of assume it means um dealing with drugs or whatever, like that type of thing. Uh
No, it's more like when people have experiences. There are some drug references in the book, and there are some experiences around that, but not a ton. But there's a few. But high strangeness is a term that I don't remember where it came from, but it's like sometimes with these paranormal experiences or UFO experiences, there are things that are almost dreamlike that don't quite make sense. It's like you're driving down a road and then you're 30 miles away suddenly, or you're talking to somebody at a gas station, and like glitch in the matrix kind of things almost. Um, anything that doesn't make sense kind of falls under that umbrella, where it's like it you can't explain it because it doesn't fit this reality at all.
yeah, that's another thing too, is the matrix thing, or like the simulation. Like if we're living in it, I don't know if you believe or I've heard of like that we could potentially be living in a simulation. So if we're living in a simulation, then it's like who, you know, knows like who is operating the simulation or whatever they're doing, where they
Right.
could like change things randomly, or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know how
Are we
much you
all
buy
something?
into that type of thing.
Yeah. I'm a little bit skeptical on that. But who knows? We could all just be a fever dream of some artificial intelligence somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's the crazy thought is, which that would be kind of like, that kind of reminds me of idealism, where exactly that, if some super intelligent AI is literally having a dream and this is it. But the thing is, like with me, is like I don't really necessarily, I could potentially buy into the simulation. There are reasons why I don't. But with like idealism, I mean, who knows what's true? But like with idealism, or like that we're living in, like this is all kind of just like a dream essentially, or whatever. Is that like this feels so real? Obviously, to I'm assuming you, it feels so real to me. And like when we dream, like when you think back on a dream, it's a dream. But right now, I definitely don't feel like I'm in any type of dream. Even
Right.
though they say that like we wouldn't know, even if it's a simulation, or if it's like a dream type thing, you wouldn't know. Like it would feel normal, but then at the same time, everyone asks, with the simulation theory, it's kind of like, why would anybody want to have a simulation of my life? But it's like, who knows what they're having a simulation for? I've heard that it could
Yeah.
be like literally like an advertise not advertising, but like a what do you call it? Like a some sort of experiment to like kind of figure out, like far into the future, if they're like, let's experiment to see, you know, how well Starbucks does, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
let's test something in this simulation. And
Yeah.
supposedly in the future, like we're going to get to a point where we're supposedly going to be able to have our own little simulations, like potentially
Yeah.
on our
Yeah.
iPhone. Like we already kind of do, but like it would have to be like conscious simulations, for like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
literally have like a little your own little world in your pocket. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Which I mean, that when you get into that stuff, it just, it gets crazy. But in terms of the high strangeness thing is weird. Like none of the part of the reason why I think that I don't really buy fully in, not that I don't, it's not that I don't buy into it. It's just I don't personally relate to it, is because none of this stuff has really happened to me for the most part.
Right.
It seems like I can make sense of everything, and if I can't make sense of something, I would assume that I was probably just kind of like zoned out or something. Like, like if I'm driving my car
Yeah,
and I drive an hour and then I like realize I don't remember anything, it's like, oh, I was probably just zoning or something. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard some theories that there are people who are susceptible and people who are not because of some specific genetic differences. Like there's a guy that's been studying people who have these experiences and people who don't, and found differences in their brains. What does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean that those people are more prone to, uh, you know, imaginary things, or does that mean they're more prone to being able to sense things that we can't? You could go either way with that. It gets harder when you get into things where multiple people see something, or you have data to back it up. But I, it, you know, maybe eventually we'll figure it out. Maybe we won't. I don't know. What makes it interesting to me is that it opens up so many interesting questions. And we okay, so let's take something like paranormal activity. If I go to a certain church and start talking about ghosts in my house, people are going to be like, that's demons. You gotta, whatever. There's going to be a stigma associated with that. Whereas if I go to my church and say, oh, I saw Bigfoot, nobody's going to, okay, weirdo, whatever. Or they might be like, oh, cool, tell me about it. So there's a religious stigma around some of these things, but then there's a science stigma around some of the other things. So like if you go and say, if you're an airline pilot and you tell your somebody, I saw these lights while I was flying over the Pacific Ocean, and they went down into the ocean and they came back out and they were going twice as fast as a fighter jet, or 50 times as fast or whatever. People might be like, you can't fly planes anymore, dude. That's not okay. It's the stigma is starting to lighten up a little bit, but there's theories that say that if the military really does know about this stuff and they don't want us to know about it, that they're purposely sort of discrediting and debunking things that maybe really happened, because the military doesn't want to admit that we don't know what it is and it's flying over our nuclear facilities or whatever. So it's better to say this person's crazy than to say, yeah, well, there's things in our airspace that we can't do anything about. So there's there's stigmas for different reasons, and are they are they legit or not? I don't know, but sometimes it makes us uncomfortable talking about these topics, and I like talking about these topics, so I find it interesting.
Yeah, same. Like um I don't dislike it if somebody tells me about it. I find it interesting. I definitely like don't push away from it, but I also think that like in terms of whether or not somebody does have these experiences or not, I would kind of assume that maybe like maybe I don't really want. I don't know. Like there's a part of me that thinks like maybe I don't really want to have these experiences, so I don't. And then people who kind of subconsciously want to have these experiences, like it almost like plays into them more because they want to. It's kind of like the whole thing I want to believe. Like it's like
Mhm.
if you want to believe in aliens and you're kind of constantly looking for it or thinking about it, like you're probably gonna have more of a chance of seeing it than if you don't. Do you have any? So have you had any drug experiences though, like in terms of DMT or ayahuasca or anything like that?
No, I
That
have
have
not. No,
no.
no.
Um, because I've heard that you've probably heard that, but like I've heard that that type of thing can alter your perception, and some people say when they take DMT they go to like a different planet or talk to
Yeah,
aliens or whatever. Yeah.
the DMT one is interesting because you hear people talk about the same entities. Different people are like you'll hear about machine elves or something. Like people see these, or the jester or whatever. Like there's these sort of archetypes that show up for different people the same way. Um, which I find interesting. And then there's another guy that's studying DMT and something to do with lasers, where if you take DMT and you orient this laser to hit a wall at a certain way, I don't remember the exact setup, but if you're on DMT, you can see numbers behind. It's like you're looking through a slit and you can see numbers behind it or symbols of some sort. And he's doing some research around that to try and figure out why everybody sees this. That's interesting stuff. I don't know what is going to come out of it, if it's going to be anything meaningful or if it's just going to end up being like, yeah, drugs make you see weird shit. I don't know. Um, I heard a news story recently about some mushroom that they found in Asia that makes you see tiny people. So I don't know if I would want to do that one. That sounds
Yeah.
a little scary, but
And then what are some of the, I've heard like cattle decapitation, or like you mentioned Skinwalker Ranch. Um, like we kind of know that the cattle decapitation thing happens, right? Like that's been
yeah. And
verified,
I don't
right?
know that we know what's going on there, but yeah, it does seem like definitely a real thing. It doesn't seem to be happening as much anymore. It seems like there was a wave of it in the 70s and 80s, maybe into the 90s. I think it still happens, but it's much more rare. Uh, so we can try and draw some different conclusions based on that. It could be that it was sort of like a cultural moment that I don't know. There's a lot of ways we can interpret that, and I don't know which one is right, but it definitely seems like there's something going on there, and it's super weird the cases that you hear about where the cattle, you know, is dead and its genitals are gone and its blood is gone, but otherwise it's fine and there's no blood on the ground. Like that's weird. Or like very surgical cuts, or you know, just strange organs missing that you know should be there. Super weird, but
Yeah. And then what do you think about the drone from last year or so that I
the New
brought up?
Jersey drone thing,
Yeah,
that
like did
I don't know. I don't know. That was weird. And I've heard that it's happened in Europe some too. Um, it's a little concerning because it's like the we got mixed messages from government agencies about whether it was they did or didn't know what it was, and it went on for quite a while, and it was weird. I It could be somebody else has got some tech that they're experimenting with, like Russia or China or somebody. It could be some kind of weird diversion where there's UFOs, and so then we threw some drones up there to muddy the waters. It could be that it's aliens. I don't know. It could be that one. I never figured that one out at all, and I don't know what the general consensus was on that, but it was
well
odd.
that's what's weird is it seems like they never really come out after and say that it's almost like nobody knows, which is weird because you would think that somebody would know.
Yeah.
You'd think that the military could send something up there and see. And one thing that surprised me is I really normally I had a guy on this podcast who actually worked for the uh not the CIA, not the FBI, but like the other one. But I asked him what he thought of it, and he was like, "Oh, I mean, I think he just thought it was like bullshit or whatever. It was just people flying drones or doing pranks or using AI or whatever." Um, but one thing that surprised me, like, it definitely could have been AI or something. But some of the videos that I saw, I fly drones, and I know a good amount about how drones, like at least consumer drones work. I guess it could have been military, some other kind of drone, but it definitely wasn't like to me. It did not look like normal. It looked like something weird was going on, and the fact that nobody knows, or if the government does know, they're not telling us. It's just kind of weird to me.
Yeah, it is
Um, I-
weird.
yeah. But so, lastly, what is your I guess that's what your overall viewpoint would be on all of it. I know it's hard to answer, and I know like you probably don't really know.
Yeah.
But is there like you said there's kind of like a through line um with what did you say like
So
with
there's a couple. Trauma is one thing
trauma,
that
yeah.
comes up a lot. The sort of mind to mind communication comes up a lot. Um, the the fact that some of these stories have elements that are sort of verifiable is interesting. You know, like the or at least semi verifiable, like the person who saw had a dream about these bodies in giant pots, and then weeks or months later the news breaks of a serial killer. These kind of things. Um, I I feel like and then if you look at all the things coming out from the government and from whistleblowers about they're talking about retrieving crashed uh, craft of unknown origin and bodies with it and all these things. It's like there's something in my mind. There's something more going on than what we generally accept as reality. Um, I I can't like as much as I've looked into this, I can't discount it all. And it seems there's some kind of interconnectedness between these different things. Uh, but I don't know what to make of it. And I don't know that I want to at this stage. I want to kind of keep my mind open rather than decide this is what it is, because I need to hear more stories and need to learn more. But yeah, that's my long-winded answer for what is all this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I think it's better to have that answer than to pretend like you know. I mean, a lot of people have their own theories, and it's like that's a lot of times those theories are interesting, but it's probably just not true. So, and that's kind of like the problem with this whole thing is it's like no one really knows, and it seems like we're kind of getting closer to maybe knowing, but also not.
Well, and if you think about it, like let's say that there really is some aliens or non-human intelligence that's more advanced than us that's here. Let's just say that that's true, and we're trying to figure it out and study it. Well, if they're more advanced than us and smarter than us and they don't want to be studied, they might be pretty good at avoiding, you know, we're gonna make your phone not work when you try to record it, or we're gonna use some kind of cloaking technology to prevent it from getting picked up by your camera or whatever. Or maybe it's all like if this mind to mind stuff is real, maybe there's not actually a physical thing there. Maybe it's just being projected into your mind. I don't know. There's a lot of ways that it could be explained. Um, but if there really is something interacting with us that's smarter than us, if they wanted to be known, they could be known. They could just show up on the White House lawn, as they say. But uh, they may not want us to figure it out. Maybe it's like Star Trek and the Prime Directive, where you don't interfere with lower civilizations or something. Who knows?
Yeah, I just don't really know why they would be here if that was the case. That's like one thing is like, um, if they are here and we don't know they're here, like I don't really know what their purpose would be if they're here amongst us and we don't know. And then also, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I'm just kind of like assuming that if they were to come here, you're totally right. They could come here without us knowing, because if they're way smarter than us, they could be super tiny or whatever, like make us just distract us so we don't know. But I would assume I just don't really know what they would be doing if they're like kind of living amongst us. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean it could be curiosity. It could just be like us
yeah,
going to the zoo or something, or it could be one of the people in the book who told me stories about interacting with the gray aliens said that they have um, so DNA is kind of a universal, even though like you would think that Earth would be the only place that has this structure, but the they were postulating that it spreads throughout the universe through asteroids and comets and whatever, and that's how
wow,
life gets started on different
that's
planets.
crazy.
But they said the gray aliens, their genetics have sort of bottlenecked to the point where they don't have enough genetic diversity, and they're trying to figure out if they can borrow some of our genes to diversify their lineage a little bit. That was the explanation that one person gave me as to why they're here, and they're trying to help us from keep us from blowing ourselves up because this is an interesting planet and there's a lot going on here. But
Yeah, like
take
well,
that
there's
for for what it's worth. But
yeah, there's like the theory, like you said, which that we're essentially aliens that we came. What's that like? I forgot what that's called. Not transhumanism, but like I forgot.
yeah, I
Um,
can't think of it.
but yeah, we somehow, like you just said, came here on asteroids or whatever. But I mean, how would the DNA get on to the asteroids? You know what I mean? Like it's one thing if like if an alien species came here on an aircraft thousands of years ago or whatever and like set up shop here. But like if it was just like a random event, is it panspermism?
Yeah. That's it.
If it's somehow almost by accident, and like how would the DNA even get onto the
I
asteroid? You know what I mean?
maybe yeah. I mean, from a planet getting blown up, and I don't know, or from
I
uh
mean that yeah,
if it's if every like let's just throw something out as a theory. Let's say that life is all over the place. There's millions of planets that have life on it, and it's really common across the universe. I don't know how likely that is. It's hard to say, but then if that were true, then maybe all kinds of contamination. You send a space shuttle out into space and or to the moon, and some of the DNA lands there, and then a billion years go by, and suddenly something's living on the moon, and we're long gone from the Earth. How did that get there? Well, because a billion years ago we sent a rocket up and left a little DNA behind or something. I don't know. I'm making stuff up, but
yeah, no, I mean it's definitely interesting. Unfortunately, I view things in kind of like a boring way, which is that it's not like I don't believe in aliens. I just don't think they've come here yet. We can't go there. And anything paranormal that happens here, I kind of feel like is just psychological or of the brain. But I mean, the whole thing is, like I said in the very beginning, like stuff's coming out that there definitely are UAPs, and I mean, really, it's like you said, who knows? I mean, I don't know. One last question is, in terms, I mean, have we found any? Do we know for sure? Like, there's the whole Roswell thing. Do we know for sure? And supposedly, I feel like I've even recently heard something about that maybe came to light or something that like we do have some sort of we have. I think somebody actually came out, a government person came out and said we do have a species not of this earth or whatever. Like something actually did come
yeah,
out,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah.
So
I think it seems to be there's different messages coming out from different people, government officials. Some of them are saying no, there's nothing to this, and others are saying yes, there is. So it kind of comes down to, um, does that mean there's different factions that some are trying to hide the truth and some are trying to get it out, or does that mean that there's some kind of psyop going on where they want to convince us of something, or does it mean that one person knows information that the other one doesn't? There you can come up with different scenarios, but there have been several people who have come out and said, yeah, the Roswell thing was legit, and there's been a long cover up of it. Um, so take that for what it's worth.
and was it just the Roswell thing, or has there been something more recent that has? Is it just
Um,
pretty much Roswell that?
no, so the David Grush is the name of one of the guys that's talked the most about this, and he says that there's a crash retrieval program. Anytime one of these things goes down, it's sort of a race between the US, China, and Russia to go get it. And they will go into any country and they will pay people off. They will bribe them to shut up. They will intimidate them, whatever they need to do, because they're trying to reverse engineer this technology. And so they're like, this is national security. So we need you guys to shut up. There's I think I mentioned earlier, James Fox has a documentary called Moment of Contact where he does a whole movie about this interesting case in Brazil from the 1980s or 90s. I can't remember. Relatively recently, in terms of, compared to Roswell, um, that has a lot of witnesses, a lot of uh, people that didn't know each other whose stories all line up. It's a really interesting. He puts together a really interesting um, case for this being real. But then there's, I think David Grush, the whistleblower, talked also about there being one in 1933 in Italy that we ended up getting our hands on after World War II and bringing it back here. There was another one in. There have been several just in New Mexico that supposedly we were able to track down and retrieve. But again, like, you're just taking, like, until they wheel it out of the hangar and say, here it is, we won't know for sure.
Yeah, I feel like there was a story too with I don't know if it was like I want to say like I don't think it was Bob Hope, but it was somebody like that where
Oh
like
yeah, was it
he
Jackie Gleason? I can't remember. Somebody from that era.
he supposedly was a like they took him down to see the
Yeah, I
basically
think it
the
was supposed. The story was that it was Richard Nixon took him and showed him the aliens or something.
yeah, and then he had like a house that was kind of like an alien style themed house.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and then there's this recent asteroid, I guess, the AI Atlas that I don't know if
Oh
you
yeah,
have you heard
yeah,
about that. That one
yeah.
scientist that was recently on Joe Rogan. I'm forgetting his name, but he thinks, he's open to the idea that it's at least open to the idea that it is aliens, and he thinks that all the scientists should be. But unfortunately, it seems like it's always ends up not being. But we'll see. So, what about some of these guys? Like, I don't know if you've heard of like Lou Elizondo or
Yeah.
like, I mean, do you feel like some of these types of people are? There's a bunch of other guys too, like, are believable, or do you think that they're kind of
I That's a tough one because they work in military intelligence, right? So you got to take what they say. They have credibility because of their position and their authority, but also they work in intelligence, and part of that job is spinning a narrative, and sometimes it involves deception and stuff. So I do think that uh, at least some of what he's saying is probably true. I don't trust everything that he says. Just him as an example. I'm not discounting it. It's just sort of like I'm not gonna take his word for every last detail because you know he might have been told things that they wanted to get out there.
supposedly he doesn't work for anyone anymore, right? Or is he still working for?
I don't know. I don't know what his status is. He might be right.
Yeah. Okay. So, lastly, your book. If just go ahead and like plug your book, and if there's anything else you
Yeah.
wanted to say that I left out, and then
Okay.
also I always ask too anything that you're in, and this isn't like a plug or anything, but it's just like anything that you're into in terms of podcasts, movies, TV shows, music, whatever you want to throw out there that you're into. I'm just interested in what people are. I'm always looking to watch something new or listen to something new or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the book is called Strange Light. The subtitle is Personal Accounts of UFOs, NDEs, and Other Enduring Mysteries. It's available on Amazon. It's available at Barnes and Noble, not on the shelf, but on their website. And in fact, you can go into any local bookstore and ask them, and they won't have it on the shelf, but they can order it for you. Or if you want like a signed copy or something, you can go to my website, which is strangelightbook.com. You can contact me there if you want to share a interesting experience that you've had. I do have an audiobook for the first book in the works. I'm not sure when that's going to come out. My narrator is working hard on it. And other than that, yeah, you can find me trying to promote my book on various social media platforms if you want to. But it's I just have fun with it. I'm not doing anything super dramatic on there. As far as like interesting movies and things like that, we've talked about a bunch of them already. The James Fox one called Moment of Contact, he just re-released it with some new additional details. That's been really interesting. Um, you mentioned Pluribus. That's been pretty cool. I've liked that. Makes you stretch your brain a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
I recommend to finish it, even though the only problem that I did have with it was that it was somewhat of a slow burner. Like they didn't give a lot of information. So I'd say the type of thing where hopefully they will give the information, but we got to wait another couple of years until the second season. You know what I
I guess
mean?
that's classic for same with Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. That's kind of how he does, right? He drags it out over a long time. So
Yeah, a lot of people were saying about Breaking Bad, and I didn't agree, but I think it probably may have been just because by the time I got into it, it was already the fourth season or whatever, so I could just kind of watch it all.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's much easier to stay on top of it if you can binge it than waiting for years.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to think if there's anything else that Age of Disclosure, which is another one that has Lou Elizondo involved and a bunch of I think Marco Rubio's in it and a bunch of high level government officials. That was interesting just to hear them all from all different parts of the government and different political parties and all that having a consistent story about what we are seeing and what we're finding from a sort of a military standpoint. That was interesting. Spielberg's got a movie coming out this summer that I'm looking forward to, so that'll be fun too.
Yeah.
Um, I forget what it's called. It's called something to do with disclosure, also.
Like Disclosure Day or something. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
Oh, it sounds good. Yeah. Send me the link to your stuff. And then is all the stuff, your book and all that, is that pretty new, pretty recent?
Yeah, it came out in at the very end of June, so it's been out for like 6 months or something. Yeah,
Is it doing pretty good? I know in general it's hard to,
yeah, no, it's doing
yeah.
pretty well. Good reviews, pretty decent sales for a little first time independent published book. It's I'm pretty happy with the sales and the feedback I'm getting. So yeah, I'm happy with it, and I'm gonna, it was encouraging enough that I'm gonna do another one.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks for coming on, Edson. And if you ever want to come back on again for like your next book or whatever, let me know.
Okay, cool. Thanks
All
for
right.
having
Bye,
me. It's
guys.
been really fun.
No problem. Thank you. Bye. Thanks for listening, guys.